It was around 2 a.m. when I started my drive home from another city. I had stayed late helping with a project, and I didn't want to spend money on a hotel, so I decided to just make the long drive back through the highway. It was about a 3.5-hour drive, mostly empty road cutting through farmland and small patches of woods. I'd done drives like that plenty of times before, but that night felt different. The air was cold and dry, the kind that made the world feel still. Even before I started the car, there was this strange quiet that stuck with me the whole way. I filled up the tank before getting on the main highway. The roads were empty, no cars ahead or behind me, just miles of dark pavement disappearing into the distance. The sky was pitch black except for the faint glow of stars and a half moon. The hum of my tires on the asphalt was the only thing breaking the silence. I remember feeling calm at first. I liked that kind of drive. No traffic, no noise, just the steady rhythm of the car moving forward. After about 40 minutes, I passed through a small town. There was one open gas station and a few closed shops. The lights faded behind me, and soon it was just darkness again. I noticed that the further I went, the fewer lights there were. The road turned narrower, and the shoulders disappeared. The highway became more like a long ribbon of black cutting through fields and patches of forest. My headlights stretched out ahead of me, showing only what was directly in front. About an hour into the drive, I noticed something lying on the road ahead. At first, it looked like debris, maybe a fallen branch or a blown tire. I slowed down a little, and when I got closer, I realized it was a large piece of metal, like part of a truck bumper or something. I swerved slightly to the left to avoid it and kept going. That wasn't unusual, but right after passing it, I noticed a faint flash in my rearview mirror, like the reflection of another car's lights catching on something metallic. I looked behind me, but there was nothing. The highway was empty. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. The road ahead started curving through a stretch of forest. The trees were tall and close to the edge of the road, their dark shapes crowding together. The deeper I went, the more the world felt cut off. My high beams lit up the branches and the glint of guardrails, but beyond that, everything was pitch black. I kept glancing in the mirrors out of habit, expecting to see headlights behind me, but there was nothing, just my reflection staring back. At some point, I realized I hadn't seen another car in at least 45 minutes. That's when the uneasiness really started to creep in. The strange how silence and emptiness can make your mind race. I kept thinking about that piece of metal on the road. It didn't look like it had been there long. Maybe something had fallen off a truck recently. Maybe there had been an accident somewhere up ahead. I drove another few miles before seeing something on the shoulder. It looked like a car. I slowed down again. The taillights were on, glowing dimly, and the driver's side door was open. There was no one around, no movement. It looked like it had just stopped there. I passed it slowly, my headlights sweeping across the side of it. It was an older sedan, silver or light gray, with one of the rear tires missing. The car was tilted slightly to the side, resting on a jack. There were no hazard lights flashing, no one visible inside or around it. I felt that uneasy feeling again, that sense that something wasn't right. A car broken down on a rural highway in the middle of the night. Maybe it had just happened, but the open door and the missing tire made it look like someone had left in a hurry. I kept driving, trying to shake the thought off, but the image stuck in my head. The open door, the car balanced on the jack, the silence. About 10 minutes later, I glanced in my mirror again and saw headlights far back in the distance. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe it was someone who'd come from that car. Maybe they'd finally gotten help. The headlights stayed behind me, not too close but always visible. I remember checking the speedometer. I was going about 70. They were keeping up perfectly, never gaining, never falling back. I kept looking back, watching the lights. Felt like they were following me, but maybe it was just coincidence. Still, the longer it went on, the stranger it felt. After 15 minutes, the lights were still there, matching every curve of the road. Then suddenly they disappeared. One moment they were there, the next gone. I looked again, but all I saw was darkness stretching behind me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My eyes kept darting between the road ahead and the mirror, waiting for the lights to come back. They didn't. Then, after about a minute, they appeared again, closer this time. The car must have turned off its headlights for a while, then turned them back on. That realization made my stomach drop. There was no reason for anyone to do that on an empty highway at night. I pressed the gas harder. My car picked up speed, the hum of the tires growing louder. The headlights behind me stayed close, not gaining or falling back, just matching me again. I drove like that for several miles, feeling more and more tense with each passing minute. Every instinct in my body told me not to stop. Eventually, I saw a green sign ahead for an exit. It was a small town, maybe 3 miles off the main highway. I decided to take it. The exit ramp curved down sharply, and as I took it, I glanced in the mirror. The headlights followed, turning onto the same ramp. My heart was pounding. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to get off that highway. The ramp ended at a narrow road lined with trees. I drove fast, following the faint glow of streetlights ahead. The other car stayed right behind me. After a few minutes, the lights of a gas station appeared up ahead. It looked closed, but there were bright lights around the pumps and a few parked trucks. I pulled in quickly, parking under the brightest light I could find. The silver car didn't follow me into the lot. It slowed on the road for a second, then kept going, disappearing around a bend. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The station was silent except for the buzz of the lights overhead. I looked around for any movement, any sign that the other driver might circle back, but nothing happened. After a few minutes, I decided to get out and stretch my legs. The cold air hit me as soon as I stepped out. The lot smelled faintly of oil and wet pavement. I walked around the car, checked the tires, then looked down the road where the other car had gone. It was empty. I stayed there for about 20 minutes, just waiting. Nothing came. Eventually, I decided to get back on the highway. I took a different entrance ramp, heading the opposite direction for a while, then looped back to the main route home. The rest of the drive was uneventful. But when I got home, I noticed something strange. There was dirt on the lower part of my driver's door, a long, curved smear like someone's hand had brushed against it. It wasn't there before. It looked fresh, like it had been made by someone wearing gloves. I stood there staring at it, feeling that same tightness in my chest. Could have been from the road, maybe from something that splashed up while driving, but it looked too clean, too distinct, like someone had touched the door while I was inside the car. I never saw that silver car again, but I think about it every time I drive at night. The way those headlights disappeared and came back, the way it followed me off the highway, and how quiet it all was. No honks, no passing, no sound except the hum of the road and my own heartbeat. It's been months since that night, and I still can't shake the thought that maybe, when I stopped at that gas station, the driver didn't leave. Maybe they just pulled off the road and watched. Maybe they were waiting for me to get back on the highway, waiting for another stretch of darkness to follow again. Now, every time I drive alone at night, I keep checking my mirrors more than I should. Every pair of headlights looks suspicious, and even when I know it's probably nothing, I still remember that dirt mark on my door, proof that someone had gotten closer than I ever realized. It was close to midnight when I started the drive back home. I had been helping a friend move earlier that day, and by the time everything was done, it was already late. The drive was about 3 hours through mostly empty highway, long stretches of nothing but flat road, a few gas stations, and the occasional truck stop. I didn't think much of it. I just wanted to get home, take a shower, and sleep. I remember setting up some music, opening a bag of chips, and thinking it would be an easy, quiet drive. For the first hour, everything was fine. The road was empty except for a few semi-trucks passing by every now and then. The sky was clear, and the air outside was cold enough that I could see my breath whenever I cracked the window. I was feeling a little tired, but still alert enough to keep going. I had a full tank of gas and plenty of time to make it home before 3 in the morning. Then I noticed something strange. It was around the time I passed the old rest area near mile marker 212. I saw a car sitting on the shoulder, just off the road. Its headlights were off, and there were no hazard lights blinking. I slowed down a little as I passed, out of habit, just to see if someone needed help, but I couldn't make out much in the dark. I only saw the faint shape of a sedan, maybe gray or silver, parked unevenly, like it had pulled over quickly. I didn't think much about it. People break down all the time. Maybe they were just sleeping or waiting for a tow truck. I kept driving, but after maybe 10 minutes, I saw headlights appear behind me in my mirror. They were distant at first, small dots of light far back on the empty road. It didn't seem strange right away, it was a highway after all. But after a while, I noticed they weren't fading or getting closer. They stayed the exact same distance behind me, steady and silent. It went on like that for several miles. The lights didn't pass, didn't fall back, just stayed perfectly behind me. I started feeling uneasy, that strange tension that creeps up when you can't explain something. I turned off my music and tried to focus. I told myself maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe they were driving the same speed as me, but it felt off. Then the car started closing the distance, slowly but definitely getting closer. I could see the glow of the headlights getting brighter in my mirrors. It was the same type of car I'd seen on the shoulder earlier, same low shape, same silver color. My stomach dropped. Could have been someone else driving the same model, but the timing felt too perfect. They got right up behind me, following close enough that I could barely see their license plate through the glare of the lights. I tapped my brakes lightly to signal them to back off, but they didn't. I sped up a little, and so did they. I slowed down, and they slowed down too. It wasn't random. They were matching me exactly. The highway was dead quiet. No exits for miles, no other cars, no lights except mine and theirs. My palms were slick on the steering wheel. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I kept looking for any sign of life. Another vehicle, a gas station, anything. But the road stretched ahead into darkness. After a few minutes of this, the car behind me suddenly swerved a little to the left, like it was about to pass. My pulse jumped, but then it fell back in line behind me again. It was like they were toying with me. Every few minutes they'd drift left, then return. I started to feel trapped, stuck between driving too fast and risking losing control, or slowing down and letting them get closer. I began scanning the sides of the road for any kind of turnoff. Eventually, I spotted a sign for a rest stop about 3 miles ahead. I decided that would be my chance. I'd pull in, and if they followed, I'd stay near the lights, maybe wait for a trucker or someone else to show up. I just needed to be around people. I kept my eyes fixed on the green sign as it came closer. My speed was steady at 65, and the car behind me stayed tight on my tail. When I finally saw the small exit lane appear, I flicked on my blinker and slowed down. The moment I did, the car behind me also slowed, keeping the same distance. My chest tightened. I turned onto the ramp and followed the short curve that led to the rest area. It was a small one, just a few parking spots, a couple of vending machines, and a row of bathrooms under a dim light. I parked under the light and cut the engine, keeping my eyes on my mirrors. The silver car didn't follow, kept going straight down the highway. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm myself. My hands were shaking slightly, and my breathing was uneven. I felt stupid for getting so worked up, but the fear was real. I waited another 10 minutes before deciding to get out and stretch my legs. The night air was cold and sharp. The only sounds were the buzz of the vending machine and the faint hum of the highway in the distance. I walked toward the bathroom just to splash some water on my face. The fluorescent lights inside flickered slightly, and the air smelled damp and stale. When I came back out, I froze. There was a car parked a few spots over from mine, silver, low to the ground, same model as the one that had followed me. I hadn't heard it pull in. I was sure it hadn't been there before. My chest tightened again, that same wave of fear rising up, stronger this time. I could see movement inside, a shadow shifting slightly in the driver's seat. The headlights were off, the engine silent. I stood there for a few seconds, not sure what to do. The urge to get back in my car and leave was overwhelming, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I slowly walked back to my car, unlocked it as quietly as I could, and got in. The silver car didn't move. I started my engine, backed out carefully, and drove out of the lot. As soon as I got back on the highway, I checked the mirror. For a few moments, nothing. Then, in the distance, headlights appeared again, two bright white circles cutting through the dark. I pressed harder on the gas. My speed climbed past 70, then 80. I could feel the car starting to shake a little, but I didn't care. The headlights behind me grew smaller, then disappeared over a hill. I didn't stop again. I drove the next hour straight until I reached the city limits. The first gas station I saw, I pulled in and parked under the brightest light I could find. I went inside, grabbed a drink, and just sat there for a while, trying to settle my thoughts. I checked behind me every few minutes, half expecting that same car to roll into the lot. It never did. When I finally got home, I parked in my driveway and just sat there in silence for a while. I could still feel that tense, crawling feeling under my skin, like I was being watched. I kept thinking about how quiet it had been when that car appeared at the rest stop. I didn't hear it drive in. I didn't see its lights until I was already outside. The next morning, I went out to my car to grab something I'd left in the glove box. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. A thin streak of dirt on the back bumper, like someone had brushed against it with a hand or a sleeve. It wasn't there before that night. It might have been nothing, just road dust or something kicked up from the highway, but it felt deliberate, like someone had gotten close enough to touch it. I still think about that night whenever I drive long distances. I used to like the calm of late-night highways, the emptiness, the quiet. Now I hate them. Every time I see headlights appear behind me on a dark stretch of road, my chest tightens the same way. I keep waiting for them to do what that car did, follow, match my speed, never pass. I know there was no ghost, no strange creature, nothing supernatural. But the feeling of someone out there, watching, waiting, playing a quiet game on a dark, empty highway, that's something I can't shake. It's the kind of fear that doesn't go away when you get home. It stays with you every time you see those headlights appear in the rearview mirror again, glowing through the dark, steady and patient, like they never really left. It was around 1 a.m. when I got on the highway that night. I had been working late at a job site about 2 hours away from home, and I didn't want to pay for another night at the cheap motel the company had set up for us. I figured it was better to just drive home and sleep in my own bed. The air outside was still warm, that heavy, sticky kind of summer air that makes your shirt cling to your back. The road was dry, quiet, and nearly empty. The highway was one of those long, straight stretches of asphalt that seemed to go on forever through flat land. A few hills here and there, some trees far off in the distance, but mostly nothing. My headlights reached out into the dark, catching little bits of fog that hovered low to the ground. The hum of the tires and the faint rattle from tools in the back seat were the only sounds. For the first hour, it was fine. Just another late drive. I kept the window cracked to keep myself awake. The air smelled like dust and road tar. Every few minutes, I'd pass an exit sign for some small town or a long stretch with nothing but fields on both sides. I don't even remember seeing another car for miles. That kind of emptiness can mess with you. It's peaceful at first, then slowly it starts to feel wrong. After a while, I started noticing a faint vibration in the steering wheel. It wasn't strong, but enough that I could feel it through my fingers. I thought maybe the road surface was rough or I'd picked up something in a tire. I kept an eye on it, but it didn't get worse. Still, I didn't like it. I didn't want to stop in the middle of nowhere, so I decided to keep driving until I saw a gas station. I passed a sign that said, "Next service is 28 miles. That's when I noticed something on the shoulder up ahead. At first it looked like debris, a shredded tire or maybe an animal. But as I got closer, I saw it was a car. It was parked halfway on the shoulder and halfway in the grass, facing the same direction as me. Its lights were off. The back window was gone, just open black space, and the trunk was dented in. I slowed down a little as I passed. The driver's door was open. No movement, no lights, no one standing near it. The car looked like it had been there a while. I remember thinking it was odd because if it had broken down, the driver should have had hazard lights on, or at least closed the door. It gave me a bad feeling. I didn't stop. I didn't even look too long because the idea of seeing someone in the dark next to the car made my stomach twist. After that, I kept checking my mirrors every few minutes, even though I didn't know what I was expecting to see. The road behind me was just blackness. Then the vibration in the steering wheel got worse. The whole car started to tremble slightly, and I realized something was off with one of the rear tires. I slowed down again, and the shaking eased up a little but didn't stop. I didn't want to pull over. There wasn't another light in sight, not even from far-off farmhouses. But after another few miles, I knew I had to. The car was starting to feel unstable, and the sound coming from the back was like a low thump every time the tire hit the pavement. I put my hazards on and coasted to a stop on the shoulder. The highway was dead quiet. When I turned the engine off, the silence hit me all at once. I could hear the faint ticking of the cooling engine and the rustling of dry grass in the ditch. The air felt heavier out there, like everything was holding its breath. I got out and walked around to the back. My flashlight barely cut through the dark. The left rear tire was flat, not a slow leak, completely deflated. I looked closer and saw a tear in the rubber, like something had sliced it. It didn't look like a normal puncture from a nail or sharp rock. It was a long, thin cut along the sidewall. I remember thinking it looked deliberate. My first thought was that I must have hit something earlier without realizing, maybe a piece of metal from the wrecked car I passed. But then I remembered how clean the road looked. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had done it on purpose, though I had no idea how or when. I decided to change it quickly and get back on the road. I opened the trunk and pulled out the spare and the jack. The air was thick and still. Every sound I made, metal tools clinking, the crunch of gravel, seemed too loud. The headlights threw a small circle of light ahead of me, and everything outside of that felt endless. While I was crouched down, loosening the lug nuts, I heard something behind me, just a soft sound, like gravel shifting. I froze. The noise stopped immediately. I told myself it was nothing, maybe wind or an animal, but I could feel my heart pounding. I looked down the road both ways, nothing but darkness. I kept working, faster this time. I could feel the sweat sticking to the back of my neck. When I slid the flat tire off, I heard it again, this time closer. It sounded like footsteps on the asphalt, slow, uneven. I straightened up, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam landed on empty road. That moment lasted forever. I just stood there, staring into the dark, every muscle in my body tense. Then, far off, I saw something, a faint shape moving just outside the edge of the light. I couldn't make out what it was, just that it was upright and slowly walking along the side of the road toward me. I grabbed the jack handle like it could actually protect me, The figure stopped when I turned the light directly at it. It didn't move closer, but it didn't turn around either. It just stood there. I didn't wait to see more. I threw the flat tire into the trunk, slammed it shut, and jumped back into the driver's seat. I started the car and floored it, even though the spare wasn't on tight. Gravel shot out behind me as I swerved back onto the highway. When I looked in the mirror, the road was empty again. I drove as fast as I could until I saw the glow of a gas station about 20 minutes later. It looked half abandoned, but there were lights on inside. I parked under the canopy, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel. When I finally got out, I walked around to check the spare. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the side of the car, just below the back door, there were smudges, dark streaks that looked like dirt or grease. But they weren't random. They looked like handprints, long, narrow marks like someone had grabbed the side of the car while it was stopped. I checked the other side. More of the same, faint but there, too high off the ground to be from me handling the tire. I tried to tell myself it could have been something from the job site earlier, maybe oil or mud, but I knew it wasn't. I hadn't parked close to anyone all day. I cleaned them off with a paper towel from the gas station and didn't say anything to anyone. I got back in the car, locked the doors, and sat there under the bright lights until the sun came up. When I finally drove home that morning, I took a different route. A few days later, I looked up that stretch of highway online. I found out that the same area where I stopped, the same mile marker, had been mentioned in a few local news articles. Over the last few years, several cars had been found abandoned there, doors open, sometimes with personal belongings still inside. Most of them were never linked to any crimes, just unresolved incidents, as the report said. But the photos looked too familiar. Cars pulled over on the shoulder, driver's door open, empty roads stretching behind them. Now, whenever I drive long distances at night, I make sure my tires are checked before I leave. I don't stop on empty roads anymore, not even for a second. Every time I think about that flat tire, I remember those handprints and the sound of footsteps in the dark. I don't know who was out there that night or what they wanted, but I know that if I had taken a little longer changing that tire, I probably would have found out. It was close to midnight when I started the drive. I had been visiting a friend in a small town about 3 hours away, and I didn't plan to stay the night. The air was heavy and warm, the kind that made the car feel stuffy even with the windows cracked. The highway stretched ahead in long, flat stretches that disappeared into blackness. My headlights cut through it, two narrow beams lighting up the faded lines and the dull shimmer of heat still rising off the asphalt. At first, it was just me and the road. The kind of drive where your mind drifts and you start thinking about everything and nothing. I remember how empty it was. No other cars, no lights from houses, not even the faint glow of distant towns. Just a wide, open stretch of two-lane highway that went on forever. The radio signal kept cutting out, so I turned it off and listened to the hum of the tires against the road and the faint rattle from something loose in the glove box. After about an hour, I noticed the first strange thing. I saw a car pulled over on the shoulder up ahead, hazard lights blinking in the dark. As I got closer, I slowed down, scanning to see if someone needed help. But there wasn't anyone around. The driver's door was closed, and the inside looked empty. I glanced in the rearview mirror after I passed, and the car just sat there, flashing orange light after orange light into the night. I remember feeling a little uneasy because there wasn't much reason for someone to abandon a car out there. There were no houses, no nearby exits, just the flat land stretching out forever. I tried not to think much of it. I told myself maybe someone went to get help, or maybe they were asleep in the back seat and I didn't see them. I kept driving. A few miles later, the road started to feel different. There were long sections without reflective paint, and the asphalt got rougher, with small cracks and uneven patches that made the car shake. I kept checking the fuel gauge even though I'd filled up earlier. The needle barely moved, but I found myself watching it over and over again, like I didn't trust it. I passed a couple of old billboards, the kind that were so faded you couldn't read what they used to advertise. One had holes punched clean through from weather or maybe bullets. The temperature outside had dropped. I could feel it through the cracks around the door. The car's heater barely made a difference. The road signs became less frequent, and when they did show up, they looked old and rusted. I saw one that said, "Rest area 12 miles." I made a note of it because I was getting tired and my eyes were starting to blur. Around then, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I was relieved to see another car. It meant I wasn't alone out there anymore. But after a few minutes, it started to bother me. The car was following close enough that I could see its headlights bouncing in my mirrors, but it never tried to pass. I slowed down slightly, expecting it to go around, but it stayed right behind me. I sped up again, and it matched my speed perfectly. It went on like that for miles. Every so often, it would drift back just enough to make me think it might turn off, and then it would close the distance again. The more I drove, the more that steady presence behind me started to crawl under my skin. I couldn't see the make or color of the car, just those bright, high headlights. I started to wonder if maybe it was someone messing around. The highway was completely empty. Who else would tail a random car at this hour? I kept my eyes on the mirror more than the road, my hands gripping the wheel tighter every mile. Finally, I saw the sign for the rest area coming up. I thought about pulling in just to let them pass, but something about that didn't feel right. If it was someone trying to mess with me, stopping alone in the middle of nowhere didn't sound like a smart move. So I passed the exit. Not long after that, the headlights behind me suddenly turned off. I looked back again and again, thinking maybe the car had turned around or stopped, but there was nothing, just darkness stretching behind me. My stomach dropped. I kept waiting for those lights to reappear, maybe from a bend in the road or a hill, but they didn't. It was almost worse not seeing them. My mind went wild, imagining that car parked on the side somewhere, lights off, waiting. Every shape along the edge of the highway started to look like a vehicle or a person. I started counting down the miles to the next town, but the road just kept going. After another 20 minutes, I finally saw light ahead, a gas station. It looked old, with a single flickering sign and one car parked out front. I didn't care. I pulled in fast, the gravel crunching under my tires. The lot was empty except for that one car, and I couldn't tell if it was running or not. I parked by the pumps and just sat there for a second, my hands shaking. I didn't see anyone around, not inside the little building, not near the car. The lights inside were dim, and the sign on the door said, "Open," but it didn't look like anyone was there. I thought about honking or knocking on the window, but I didn't. Something about the stillness made me want to get back on the road instead. When I looked in my mirror before leaving, I noticed something strange. There was mud splashed across the back of my car. I hadn't gone through any puddles. I leaned out the window and checked. It was thick and dark, splattered up along the bumper like something had been thrown from behind. My first thought was that the car that was tailing me must have hit something, maybe an animal, and it sprayed onto me. But then I thought about how close it had followed. The mud was dry, like it had been there for a while. I got back on the highway, trying not to think about it. My eyes felt dry and heavy, and I started counting mile markers again to stay awake. About half an hour later, I saw movement in the grass along the shoulder. It looked like a shape crouched low, almost like someone kneeling. I slowed down slightly, thinking maybe it was a deer or something, but when my headlights hit it, it didn't move. I couldn't make out much, just a dark figure with its back turned. As I passed, I kept my eyes straight ahead. For the next few miles, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The quiet wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt heavy, like the air itself had changed. I caught myself checking the mirrors again and again, expecting those headlights to reappear. When I finally reached a small cluster of lights marking the edge of a town, I felt like I could breathe again. I pulled into another gas station, one that looked newer and more alive. I parked under the bright canopy lights and got out. My knees felt weak when I stood up. I walked around to the back of the car again, still thinking about that mud. That's when I noticed the scratches. Thin, uneven lines across the trunk and bumper. Some were faint, others deep enough to leave marks through the paint. They weren't the kind you'd get from branches or debris. They looked like they'd been made by hands or something dragging across. I stared at them for a long time. I couldn't make sense of it. I hadn't been off the highway. Nothing had touched the car as far as I knew. The thought of someone getting that close to me out there on that empty stretch of road made my skin crawl. I washed the car the next morning, but the deeper marks were still visible under the new coat of dust. I tried to convince myself it was something else. Rocks from the road, a loose chain from the undercarriage, anything. But every time I looked at the back of the car, I remembered that feeling of being followed and how those headlights had just vanished. I still drive that highway sometimes, though I avoid doing it at night now. I've never seen that same car again, but I keep my mirrors tilted a little differently these days, angled to catch the full stretch of road behind me. It's not that I expect to see it, but sometimes when the night is clear and the road is empty, I swear I can still feel the weight of those headlights pressing against the back of my neck, like something that never really left the dark behind me. It was late, close to midnight, when I got on the highway that night. I had been driving back from a long weekend trip visiting family 2 states over. The plan was to leave earlier in the day, but one thing led to another, and I ended up starting the drive long after sunset. The route was one I'd taken before, mostly long stretches of highway cutting through open farmland and woods, with few towns in between. It was the kind of road where you could drive for miles without seeing another car or even a streetlight. The air was cool, the kind of fall night where you could smell the dry leaves through the vents. The road shimmered faintly under the headlights, the broken white lines slipping past one after another in a steady rhythm. I had a thermos of coffee in the cup holder and music playing quietly just to fill the silence. For the first couple of hours, it felt fine, peaceful even. The highway was almost empty. Every now and then, a truck passed going the opposite direction, its headlights filling my car for a few seconds before disappearing into the dark. The rest of the time, it was just me, the road, and the steady sound of tires on asphalt. It wasn't until sometime after 1 a.m. that I noticed something strange. I saw headlights far behind me, faint at first, but slowly getting closer. I figured it was just another car passing through, so I didn't think much of it. But after a few minutes, I realized the car wasn't gaining much. It was keeping pace, just far enough back that I could see the glow of its lights in the mirror, but not close enough to make out any details. At first, it didn't bother me. Highways can feel lonely at night, and sometimes it's actually a little comforting knowing someone else is out there. But after 20 minutes, the car was still there. Same distance, same steady glow behind me. I tried speeding up a little, and so did they. I slowed down, and they slowed down too. That's when I started to get uneasy. I told myself maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe they were going the same speed by chance. But the longer it went on, the harder it was to believe that. The road was completely empty. No exits, no streetlights, just the narrow beams of my headlights ahead and theirs behind. After a while, I started paying closer attention to them in the mirror. The headlights looked uneven, like one was slightly dimmer than the other, which made them easy to recognize. Every time I glanced up, they were still there, always the same distance back. I passed a green sign that said the next gas station was 26 miles away. I decided I'd stop there no matter what, even if I didn't need gas. I just wanted to see if the car would follow me off the highway. The road ahead was pitch black. My high beams showed nothing but the faint outlines of trees and the occasional road marker. There were no other cars, no houses, no lights, just the empty road. I checked the rearview mirror again, and for the first time in over half an hour, the headlights were gone. I slowed a little, trying to see if they'd turned off somewhere, but there hadn't been an exit for miles. I kept glancing back, expecting them to reappear, but they didn't. The feeling of relief didn't last long. About 10 minutes later, I saw something on the shoulder up ahead. A car pulled over, facing the same direction I was going. It had one headlight dimmer than the other. My chest tightened when I realized it was the same pair of lights I'd been seeing behind me. The car was parked maybe 20 feet off the road, engine running, but I couldn't see anyone inside. I drove past without slowing down. My hands were gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I kept my eyes forward, pretending I hadn't noticed, but I could feel my heart racing. I didn't see them pull back onto the road behind me, at least not right away. I kept checking the mirrors every few seconds, half expecting those uneven headlights to show up again. For a while, nothing. The road behind me was dark and empty. Then, about 15 minutes later, they were back. Same distance as before, same steady speed. That's when it really hit me. Whoever that was, they weren't just driving the same direction as me by chance. They were following me. I thought about calling someone, but there was barely any signal out there. I had one bar flickering on and off, and I didn't want to risk losing focus on the road. I just kept driving, trying to stay calm. The next exit sign finally appeared, a small one for a rest stop 2 miles ahead. I thought about taking it, but then I hesitated. If they were following me, pulling off into a dark, empty rest stop probably wasn't a good idea. I decided to keep going. A few minutes later, I passed the exit, and in my mirror, I saw their headlights follow me right past it. They hadn't even slowed down. By then, my pulse was pounding in my ears. I tried to think rationally. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe I was just tired and reading too much into it. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. No one drives that far, in the middle of the night, matching someone else's every move by accident. I started thinking about what I'd do if they tried to pull up next to me or run me off the road. There wasn't much shoulder to pull onto, just rough gravel and ditches. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept going. After another 20 minutes, I saw another green sign for an exit. This one led toward a small town. I made a quick decision. Instead of slowing down gradually like I normally would, I sped up hard, then took the exit at the last second, cutting the wheel fast enough that my tires squealed. I could see their headlights swing behind me. They tried to follow, but they were too late. The turn came up fast, and they blew right past it. I didn't slow down until I was deep into the exit road, which led toward a cluster of lights in the distance. My hands were shaking. I pulled into a parking lot near a 24-hour diner and just sat there for a minute, trying to catch my breath. I waited a few minutes before turning the car off. I wanted to make sure they didn't circle back. I kept watching the road behind me, half expecting those uneven headlights to come down the off-ramp, but they never did. I went inside the diner and stayed there for almost an hour, drinking coffee and staring out the window. Cars passed by every now and then, but none of them looked like the one that had followed me. When I finally felt calm enough to leave, the clock said it was past 3 a.m. Before I got back on the highway, I checked the trunk and the rear bumper, just out of paranoia. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. On the layer of dust covering the back of my car, there were marks. Long streaks that looked like fingerprints. Not handprints, just the ends of fingers dragged across the dirt in uneven lines. They weren't there when I started the trip. I wiped them off without thinking and got back in the car. The rest of the drive home was uneventful. I didn't see the car again, but even when I got off the highway, I kept looking in the mirror all the way home, half expecting those headlights to appear again in the distance. A few days later, out of curiosity, I searched online for incidents on that highway. I found a few forum posts and local news articles from the past couple of years. Stories about drivers being followed late at night by someone in an older car with one headlight dimmer than the other. Most of them ended the same way. The car would tail people for miles, disappear for a bit, then reappear again further down the road. No one ever caught them, and the police never found a suspect. Now I make it a rule never to drive that stretch of highway after dark. Even years later, I still think about those uneven headlights in my mirror. I can't stop wondering what would have happened if I had pulled over, or if I had taken that rest stop exit instead of driving past it. I'll never know who was behind me that night, but I'm sure of one thing. Whoever it was, they weren't just out there by accident. It was just past midnight when I started my drive home. I had been helping a friend with some last-minute workout at a job site about an hour outside of town, and by the time I finished, everyone else had already left. I didn't think much of it. I've done plenty of late drives before. It was summer, still warm even at night, and the air smelled heavy with dirt and grass. I had a thermos of coffee in the cup holder and the radio playing quietly, just enough noise to keep me awake. The first half of the drive was easy. I took the main highway for a while, which was wide and smooth and mostly empty. Every few miles, I'd pass a semi-truck or a car heading in the opposite direction, their lights flashing by in seconds. After about 30 minutes, I reached the exit that led to the county road, an old, winding stretch that cut through farmland and low hills. I always took that route because it shaved off about 15 minutes, but I never really liked it. There were no streetlights, barely any houses, and the cell service dropped to nothing about halfway through. Still, I told myself it was fine. I just wanted to get home. Once I turned off the highway, everything got quieter. The sound of my tires on the asphalt was the only thing breaking the silence. The road curved gently through fields and clusters of trees. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of barns and silos against the sky. The headlights only reached so far, and beyond that, the darkness was thick and empty. I drove like that for about 20 minutes before I noticed something strange up ahead. At first, I thought it was just another car parked on the shoulder. I could see a pair of dim red taillights glowing through the trees. But as I got closer, I realized the car wasn't running. The lights were on, but the engine was off. It was sitting at an odd angle, halfway on the road, like someone had stopped suddenly. I slowed down as I approached. The car looked old, maybe a dark green sedan, early 2000s model. The driver's side door was open, and the interior light glowed faintly. The rest of the area was pitch black. I looked around, expecting to see someone walking or maybe trying to flag me down, but there was no one. The car had one flat tire, the rear right one. The rim was sitting low, and there were small shards of something scattered around it, maybe glass or gravel. I didn't stop. I drove past slowly, keeping one hand tight on the wheel, trying to look without making it obvious. When I passed the front end of the car, I caught a glimpse of the inside. The seats were empty. There was a jacket lying on the hood, a half-empty water bottle on the roof, and the driver's door was still wide open, like whoever was driving had gotten out in a hurry. I told myself they must have gone to get help, but something about the scene didn't feel right. No hazards flashing, no signs of a struggle, but no signs of anyone either. Just the open car sitting in the middle of nowhere. I kept driving. The feeling in my chest got heavier with every mile. I couldn't stop glancing at the mirrors, half expecting to see headlights appear behind me. But the road stayed empty. About 10 minutes later, the road narrowed and dipped into a wooded area. The trees grew thick on both sides, and my headlights barely cut through the darkness ahead. The air felt different there, denser, quieter. I rolled my window up, turned the radio down even lower, and tried to focus on the center lines. Then I saw something ahead again. At first, I thought it was just an animal crossing the road, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person, a man. He was standing right at the edge of the road, facing away from me. He wasn't moving, just standing completely still. I slowed down fast. He was wearing dark jeans and a jacket, maybe gray or brown. It was hard to tell in the headlights. He didn't have a flashlight, and there wasn't a car anywhere nearby. I tapped my brakes and moved slightly to the opposite lane, trying to give him space, but he didn't turn or move, just stood there, facing the trees. For a few seconds, I thought about stopping, but something in me said not to. There was no reason for him to be standing there like that. No reason to be out here at all. I eased back onto the gas and passed by slowly, keeping my eyes straight ahead. As my car went past him, I caught a glimpse in the mirror. He still hadn't turned around. That stretch of road seemed to go on forever after that. My hands felt slick on the steering wheel, and my heart was pounding harder than it should have been. I told myself over and over that it was nothing, just some guy walking or waiting for someone. But that didn't make sense. No car, no bag, no flashlight. Just standing there in the dark. A few minutes later, I noticed lights behind me. Headlights. At first, I was relieved. Finally, another vehicle. But then I realized how sudden they appeared. One moment the road behind me was completely black, and the next, 2 bright lights were following in the distance. I thought maybe it was someone who had turned onto the road after me. But as I kept driving, the lights didn't stay distant. They were getting closer, fast. Within a minute, the car behind me was maybe 3 or 4 car lengths away. Too close. I adjusted my speed, but no matter what I did, speeding up, slowing down, they matched it perfectly. My stomach felt tight. I stared in the mirror, trying to make out what kind of car it was, but the headlights were too bright. I turned down the next small road I saw just to test it. It was a narrow gravel road, barely big enough for 2 vehicles. I didn't recognize it, but I figured if they followed me, I'd know it wasn't a coincidence. The headlights followed. That's when the panic really hit. I pressed harder on the gas, kicking up dust and gravel. My tires crunched and skidded on the uneven road, but I didn't care. I just needed to put distance between us. I drove for maybe a mile, winding through what looked like fields and tree lines. The headlights stayed behind me the entire time. Finally, I spotted a small clearing to the right, a gap between 2 trees that led into an open patch of land. I turned in, cut the headlights, and rolled the car as far back into the dark as I could. My heart was hammering. I could barely breathe. I sat completely still. Through the windshield, I could see the glow of the other car's headlights as it came closer down the gravel road. Then it slowed down. The lights got brighter, sweeping across the trees, scanning. They stopped right near the turnoff where I had pulled in. I could see the silhouette of the car now, a small SUV, maybe silver or white. It idled there for what felt like forever, lights washing over the branches, before it slowly started to move again. The headlights disappeared down the road until everything went dark again. I stayed there for a long time before I dared to start my car again. I waited until the night felt still, then crept back onto the gravel road and followed it until it met the main road again. I didn't see another vehicle the entire rest of the way home. When I finally pulled into my driveway, it was nearly 2:30 in the morning. I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring out at the quiet street in front of my house, trying to calm down. I checked my mirrors again before getting out. Empty. No lights. No movement. Inside, I couldn't sleep for hours. My brain kept replaying everything. The empty car with the open door, the man standing by the trees, the headlights following me. It all felt connected somehow, like parts of something I didn't understand. The next day, I checked the local news and the police blotter, thinking maybe I'd see something about a car accident or a missing person, but there was nothing. No mention of a stranded car. No mention of anyone found along the road. Nothing at all. A few days later, I drove that route again during daylight. I found the stretch where I had seen the parked car, but it was gone. No tire marks, no glass, no sign it had ever been there. I found the spot where the man had been standing, too, but in the sunlight, it just looked like another patch of trees. Quiet, normal, empty. I still don't know what really happened that night. Maybe I stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to see. Maybe someone was trying to make me stop. I'll never know for sure, but I haven't taken that road again since. Now, whenever I drive at night, I keep my doors locked, my speed steady, and I never, ever stop for anything in the road. It's strange how fast a normal drive can turn into something you think about for years after. The kind of night that reminds you how far away help really is when the world around you goes completely dark. It was close to midnight when I started driving again. I had been sitting at a gas station just outside a small town in Nevada, trying to wake myself up with cheap coffee and cold air. I had another 4 hours left before I reached the motel I'd booked for the night, and I remember thinking that if I didn't push through then, I'd end up sleeping in my car somewhere on the shoulder. I got back on the highway, the road stretching flat and empty ahead of me, the kind of place where you can go 10 minutes without seeing another pair of headlights. The night was quiet except for the hum of my tires and the faint whistle of wind through a cracked window. The highway felt endless. The white lines flashed rhythmically under my headlights, one after another, like a slow pulse that hypnotized me the longer I watched them. I kept trying to focus on the music, switching stations every few minutes, but most of them just played static that faded in and out. My eyes were heavy, and even though I had both hands on the steering wheel, I could feel that sluggish weight in my head that made it hard to tell how fast time was passing. At one point, I looked down at the clock on the dashboard, 12:27. The gas station had been maybe 40 miles back, which meant I should have been close to the rest stop marked on the map. I remember glancing at the fuel gauge and feeling a little tense when I saw it sitting just above a quarter tank. I told myself I'd stop at the next sign of life, even if it was just a truck stop diner or a rest area. The road started to slope slightly uphill, the kind of slow climb where you can't tell if you're gaining elevation or just imagining it. On my right side, there was nothing but open desert, flat, black land that stretched until it disappeared into the horizon. On my left, a thin guardrail ran along a dark drop that I couldn't see the bottom of. I kept driving, trying to shake off that growing unease that comes when you realize how alone you are. Then I saw something up ahead, a pair of taillights. They were dim and far away, but seeing them made me feel oddly relieved. It meant someone else was out there. I caught up slowly, noticing that the vehicle was an older truck, maybe late 90s or early 2000s. The paint was dull, and the back bumper had no plate light. The truck was going under the speed limit, weaving slightly in its lane like whoever was driving it was tired or distracted. I slowed down and stayed a few car lengths back, keeping my distance. After a few minutes, I realized the truck didn't have any brake lights, not even when it slowed down. I thought maybe the bulbs were out. It was unnerving because I couldn't tell when it was about to stop or speed up. I decided to pass it, and when the road widened, I switched lanes and began pulling up alongside it. As I came level, I glanced to my left, just a quick look, expecting to see some old guy gripping the wheel, maybe half asleep. But I didn't see anyone. The driver's seat looked empty. I thought maybe it was the lighting or the angle, so I looked again, leaning forward slightly. The seat was there, the steering wheel was there, but it looked like there was no one sitting behind it. My stomach turned cold. I pressed on the gas, just wanting to get ahead of it and not think about it. Once I was in front, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the person was slouched low, maybe their seat was reclined back. I told myself that over and over, but when I checked my rearview mirror a few seconds later, the truck was gone. Completely gone. No headlights, no movement, nothing behind me. I blinked, leaned forward, scanned the mirror again. The road was empty. For a while, I thought maybe it had turned off at some side road, but the highway had been straight for miles with no exits or intersections. The thought made my chest tighten. I felt wide awake now, adrenaline running through me, and I kept glancing back every few seconds even though there was nothing there. After maybe 15 minutes, I saw headlights again. Far back, small at first, but getting closer. It was coming fast, faster than I was going. I moved into the right lane just in case it wanted to pass, but when I checked my mirror again, I saw that it was the same old truck. The same dull headlights, same shape of the front grille, same missing plate light. Came up right behind me, almost tailgating me. I felt my palms start sweating on the wheel. I kept my eyes forward, trying not to panic, but the truck stayed locked behind me. Every time I sped up, it matched my speed. Every time I slowed down, it slowed too. There wasn't another car in sight. Just me and that thing behind me, hovering maybe 10 feet from my bumper. I thought about pulling over, but the idea of stopping out there, in the dark with whoever was in that truck, didn't feel right. This went on for what felt like forever. I was gripping the wheel so tight my arms hurt. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Then, without warning, the truck's headlights blinked off, just went completely dark. The road behind me vanished into blackness. My breath caught in my chest. I stared at my mirror, waiting for the lights to come back on, but they didn't. I didn't know if it had pulled off or if it was still there, driving with its lights off, following me. My mind was racing with possibilities, none of them good. I kept checking the mirror over and over, straining my eyes, but there was nothing visible. After about 5 more miles, I finally saw a green reflective sign, a rest area 2 miles ahead. I told myself that's where I'd stop. I didn't care if it was empty or creepy. I just needed to get off that stretch of road. I stayed in the right lane, my hands shaking on the wheel, counting the seconds. When I reached the exit, I turned onto the small loop leading into the rest stop. The place looked dead. One flickering light near the bathrooms, a single vending machine humming faintly under it. I parked close to the light and shut off the engine, trying to listen. The air outside was so still it made my ears ring. Then I saw them, headlights in the distance, the same old truck pulling down the exit lane. It rolled slowly, the tires crunching over the gravel. I didn't know what to do. I sat there, frozen, trying not to move, hoping the person couldn't see me through the windshield. The truck came around the loop, passed me slowly, then stopped at the far end of the lot, facing the exit back to the highway. It didn't move again. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. The truck just sat there, engine running. I could see the faint shimmer of heat from the exhaust, but there was still no sign of movement inside. Finally, I started my car again, eased back onto the main road, and kept driving. I looked in my mirror for the next hour, but the truck never followed. When I reached the motel at around 3:30 a.m., I sat in the parking lot for a while, staring at my reflection in the windshield, trying to make sense of what had happened. I never figured it out. The next morning, I looked up news from the area, wondering if there had been reports of stolen vehicles or accidents, but there was nothing. To this day, I still don't know if there was someone in that truck or if something else was going on. All I know is that stretch of highway felt wrong, like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. I still drive long distances sometimes, but I always avoid that route. Every time I see an old truck in my rearview mirror, my stomach twists the same way it did that night. I don't think it was anything supernatural. I think someone was out there messing with me, maybe following random cars for fun, maybe something worse. But the not knowing, that's what still gets me. The silence of that highway, the lights going out, the truck just sitting there in the dark. It all felt too deliberate, too human. And somehow, that's what made it terrifying. It was late, somewhere around 1 in the morning, when I found myself driving alone down a long stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. I was heading back from visiting family, trying to make it home before dawn. The drive was supposed to take about 5 hours, and I had already been on the road for 3. The highway was mostly empty, just dark pavement and the faint white lines flashing beneath my headlights. The air outside was cold, and the night sky was clear, filled with stars that seemed too bright to be real. I was getting tired. My eyes felt heavy, and my head kept wanting to drift toward the window. I had already stopped twice for coffee, but the caffeine was starting to wear off. My phone had no signal for the last hour, and the road signs said the next town wasn't for another 30 miles. I just wanted to make it home. The sound of the tires on the asphalt was the only thing keeping me focused. At one point, I saw a flicker of light behind me. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but after a while, I realized it was a pair of headlights far back on the highway. It caught my attention because I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. I kept glancing at my mirror every few minutes, just to check if it was still there. The lights didn't seem to be gaining on me at first, but they stayed perfectly steady, like whoever was driving behind me was keeping the same speed on purpose. I told myself it was just another driver out late, probably like me, trying to make it somewhere before morning. But something about how steady the lights were made me uneasy. It wasn't like a normal car closing the distance or fading away. It just stayed the same, hovering there in the darkness behind me. After maybe 10 minutes, the lights started to get closer. They weren't speeding up much, but I could tell they were closing in slowly. My stomach started to tighten a bit. I didn't want to get paranoid, but I couldn't help it. The night, the emptiness of the road, the isolation, it all made everything feel more intense. When the vehicle finally got close enough, I could see that it was an old pickup truck. The paint looked dull even under the faint glow of my headlights reflecting off it. The grille was rusted, and the truck had only one working headlight. The other was completely dead. Came up close behind me and stayed there way too close for comfort. I could see the shadow of a figure inside, but I couldn't make out any details. At first, I thought maybe they wanted to pass, so I moved slightly over to the right to give them room, but they didn't go around me. They just stayed glued to my rear bumper. My heart started beating faster. I pressed down on the gas a little, but when I sped up, they did too. Every time I tried to put some distance between us, they matched my speed perfectly. It went on like that for several minutes. My palms were sweating, and I could feel the muscles in my shoulders tightening up. I didn't know what to do. I thought about slowing down to force them to pass, but the idea of being side by side with that truck in the dark made me feel sick. The road was still completely empty, and the only light came from my headlights and theirs reflecting in my mirrors. I started to wonder if maybe they were just messing with me. There were people who did that, people who got a kick out of scaring others on empty highways. But there was something about the way the truck moved that didn't seem playful. It was too steady, too precise. Whoever was driving knew exactly what they were doing. I kept driving, hoping I'd reach an exit or a gas station soon. I checked the fuel gauge, just under half a tank left. Enough to keep going for a while, but not forever. My mouth was dry, and I realized I hadn't taken a sip of water in hours. My throat felt tight, like I couldn't swallow properly. The truck's high beams suddenly flashed on, flooding my mirrors with blinding light. I squinted and tried to focus on the road ahead, but I could barely see. I reached up and flipped the rearview mirror to block some of it, but the light was still overwhelming. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the high beams went off again. I blinked several times, my vision filled with spots. The truck was still behind me, same distance, same position. I don't know how long this went on. Could have been 10 minutes or 30. It all blurred together. The highway was endless, just long, straight, and dark. I started to feel trapped, like the road had swallowed me. Finally, I saw something ahead, a small green reflective sign. My eyes strained to read it as I got closer. It said rest area 2 miles. I felt a wave of relief, but it was mixed with dread. I didn't know if stopping would make things worse. I didn't want to pull over somewhere isolated while that truck was behind me. But the thought of staying on that highway with no end in sight was worse. When I reached the turnoff, I took it. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The rest area was small, just a few parking spaces, a single streetlight flickering above a vending machine, and a row of trees lining the back edge. I pulled into a spot under the light and turned off my headlights. The truck followed. It came in slowly, the tires crunching on the gravel, and stopped at the far end of the lot. The engine stayed running. The headlights stayed on. It didn't park properly. It just sat there, facing my direction. I could feel my pulse thudding in my neck. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. After maybe a minute, the truck's engine shut off. The headlights went dark. The whole area fell silent except for the sound of the wind and the faint hum of the vending machine. I sat frozen in my seat, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the dark shape of that truck across the lot. A few minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then the truck's door opened. I couldn't see clearly, but I heard it, that heavy metal sound of the door creaking open, followed by the thud of it closing. Then footsteps, slow, uneven footsteps on gravel. My chest tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. I looked around, trying to decide what to do. Running into the woods wasn't an option. It was pitch black out there. Sitting still didn't feel right either. I turned the key in the ignition, my hands trembling, and the engine came back to life. I threw the car into reverse, backed out fast, and swung around toward the exit. The headlights lit up the lot just enough for me to see the figure. A man standing near the vending machine, wearing a dark jacket, head slightly tilted toward me. He wasn't moving toward me anymore, just standing there, watching. I didn't wait. I sped out of the rest area, tires spitting gravel behind me, and got back onto the highway. I didn't check the mirrors for a while because I was too scared of what I might see. When I finally did, the truck wasn't there. I kept driving until I saw the lights of a larger town, then pulled into a well-lit gas station and stayed there until morning. The next day, I checked the car for any damage or marks, thinking maybe they had followed me earlier or touched it while I was parked. Nothing. It was like it hadn't happened at all. To this day, I don't know what that person wanted or why they followed me. Maybe they were just trying to scare me. Maybe they were planning something worse. But what sticks with me most is how silent it all was. Just the sound of the tires, the engine, the wind, and those slow, deliberate footsteps on gravel. I don't drive that late anymore, and whenever I take long trips, I plan them so I'm off the road before midnight. Every time I see headlights in my rearview mirror now, I feel that same cold pressure in my chest, waiting for them to disappear or follow too close. That night taught me something, that the scariest things on the road aren't ghosts or monsters. It's people. People who choose to follow you, to mess with you, to make you feel like you're not alone, even when you wish you were.